talking about here on my channel right now. It's all about Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively's.
It all began as whispers in the late-night court filings. Whispers that at first seemed like nothing more than another update in a case already drenched in twists, betrayals, and the kind of Hollywood legal maneuvering that would make even the most seasoned court watchers sit forward in their seats. But then those whispers solidified into hard text on the docket, and what that text revealed sent shockwaves through every corner of the entertainment industry. Justin Baldoni had quietly and, without any fanfare, expanded his legal team. Not with just any ordinary lawyers but with two heavyweights whose names carried reputations that could alter the entire trajectory of the legal war against Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively. Names that when spoken in legal circles were followed by nods of respect and sometimes fear. Alexander Shapiro and Jonathan Bach. And suddenly every narrative that had been crafted in glossy magazines, every interview where Blake leaned into the victim posture, every carefully worded PR statement by Ryan about dignity and fairness, all of it looked brittle, fragile, even doomed, because what Baldoni had just done was not merely about adding lawyers to his roster. It was about sending a coded message to every opponent, every analyst, every fan invested in this feud. That he was not just playing defense anymore, he was laying a trap. And the timing of it could not have been more precise, for if you rewind the story even a few weeks, you find Ryan and Blake attempting to paint themselves as the cornered innocents, the couple who had no choice but to stand firm against a manipulative Baldoni. But the truth is more slippery, more sinister, because as anyone who studies these moves knows, timing is everything, and Baldoni's timing was surgical. And his lawyers were not chosen randomly, they were chess pieces, deployed at the exact moment when Ryan and Blake believed they had secured narrative dominance, when the public began buying into when allies like the ACLU were seemingly on their side. But what no one realized was that Baldoni had been assembling his counterstrike quietly, with the patience of a strategist who knows the board better than his enemies. And by the time the filings surfaced, it was too late for Reynolds and Lively to reposition themselves without looking exactly like what they feared. Aggressors caught mid-spin, scrambling to hold on to a script that was no longer believable. And the irony is rich, because as analysts pointed out, had Ryan and Blake ever tried to pit themselves openly against the ACLU, their victim image would have shattered instantly. They would have been painted as privileged elites attempting to silence justice. And they knew it. But Baldoni's move made sure they never even had the chance, because now the game was shifting out of the shallow waters of tabloid spin and into the deep ocean of appellate law, a world where narrative collapses under precedent, and where judges do not care for celebrity tears. And in that world Alexander Shapiro is not just a participant, she is a predator, a legal tactician forged in the chambers of Ruth Bader Ginsburg herself, a woman who cut her teeth not in the Hollywood spotlight, but in the icy intellectual duels of the Supreme Court. A lawyer whose resume boasts victories that reshaped federal fraud statutes and redefined insider trading law. A lawyer who once stood before the most intimidating bench in America and walked away with decisions that altered the future of white-collar litigation. And now she was standing beside Justin Baldoni, her name inked into his defense team, her presence transforming his camp overnight from embattled to fortified, from reactive to terrifyingly proactive. Because Shapiro is not a lawyer you bring in to clean up paperwork or sit quietly at counsel's table. She is the lawyer you hire when you want to escalate, when you want the other side to wake up at 3 a.m. drenched in panic because, suddenly, the case they thought was winnable is tilting toward disaster. And the very fact that Baldoni was not replacing his old attorneys but rather adding to them screamed volumes about strategy, because it meant he was building layers, redundancy, a net that could catch Ryan and Blake at trial, at appeal, in every possible venue, leaving them no escape. And beside her was Jonathan Bach, less flashy in name recognition, but no less lethal in courtroom impact, a trial lawyer with a reputation for dismantling witnesses with surgical precision, a man who could spot weakness in testimony like a wolf smells blood, the kind of attorney you bring in not for show but for results, because he knows how to bend the energy of a courtroom, how to make jurors lean toward doubt when moments earlier they felt certainty. And in pairing Shapiro with Bach, Baldoni had done something that seasoned legal analysts immediately recognized. He had created a dual-threat system, appellate dominance in Shapiro, and trial warfare in Bach. A combination that meant he wasn't just preparing for one battle, but for the entire war, every front, every possible pivot. And that realization sent the Hollywood gossip machine into overdrive, because suddenly it wasn't just about legal filings. It was about the story behind the filings, the narrative that Ryan and Blake were no longer the sympathetic pair being unfairly attacked, but rather the privileged duo standing against a man who had outthought them at every turn. And when whispers began connecting Shapiro's recent involvement in Diddy's defense with her new role in Baldoni's camp, the tension deepened, because critics tried to spin it as Justin aligning himself with a Diddy lawyer. But the truth was unavoidable. In that case, Shapiro had delivered results. She had proven her capacity to weather the storm of public outrage while still carving victories in the courtroom, and that was precisely the kind of firepower Baldoni needed, because this was never only about truth or justice. It was about survival, reputation, legacy. And as insiders began speculating that Shapiro's appointment signaled a readiness for appeal, others argued that it meant something darker, that Baldoni was preparing to expose weaknesses Ryan and Blake had hoped would never surface, perhaps even tied to whispers of Vanzam, Vansham, or other buried scandals. Because remember, an appellate lawyer like Shapiro does not just defend. She finds cracks, she turns rulings inside out, she reframes entire narratives. And the fact that she once clerked for Ginsburg means she carries with her a style of legal reasoning that judges respect, that commands authority, that elevates her above the usual Hollywood attorneys who thrive on spectacle. And so imagine the imbalance now. On one side, Reynolds and Lively leaning on PR campaigns, fan sympathy, and trial lawyers accustomed to settlements. And on the other side, Baldoni armed with a strategist who has faced the Supreme Court and won. And suddenly the imbalance is not just visible, it is overwhelming. And the industry knows it, the analysts know it, and deep down Ryan and Blake must know it too. Because the panic is palpable in the subtle shifts of their behavior. The way their allies suddenly fall quiet, the way their legal filings lose confidence, and all of this, every detail, every move, paints the picture of a trap unfolding slowly, deliberately, in plain sight yet invisible until it is too late. Because Baldoni's genius is not in bluster but in patience, in letting his opponents dance until they tire, and then tightening the net until there is no air left. And as the days unfold toward trial, toward appeal, toward whatever battlefield this war moves to next, one thing is clear. This is not the story Ryan and Blake thought they were writing, this is Baldoni's story now. And Shapiro and Bach are the pens in his hand, rewriting the narrative line by line, motion by motion. While Hollywood, stunned and gasping, watches the so-called perfect couple slip from the role of victims into the reality of being cornered players in a game they never truly controlled. And as the whispers grow louder, as every headline asks the same haunting question, did Justin Baldoni just outmaneuver Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively without anyone noticing? The answer, though unspoken, is already hanging heavy in the air. Yes, he did. And the trap has only just begun to close. Ryan Reynolds trapped after Justin Baldoni's secret plan against Blake Lively. The story begins with whispers from the past, because in Hollywood, nothing truly stays buried, and reputations are built not just on the glamorous red carpet moments, but also on the ugly little tales that surface when the timing is right. And in Ryan Reynolds' case, an old anecdote has reemerged at the exact moment when he and his wife Blake Lively find themselves cornered in a spiraling legal and public relations storm engineered by none other than Justin Baldoni, who, after months of being underestimated, appears to have carefully set a trap that grows more elaborate by the day. And the more we examine the pieces on this chessboard, the more it looks like Reynolds and Lively are walking straight into a web designed to undo them. The anecdote in question comes from a man who once shared a childhood with Reynolds. A man who recalled in a recent interview that when they were young, Ryan wasn't the charming, quick-witted Hollywood star we know now, but a relentless tormentor, terrorizing him when he was just a chubby immigrant kid, throwing him into trash cans, pushing him into dog poop, even tossing away the newspapers from his delivery route, mocking him while he tried desperately to help his family make ends meet. And now, years later, the internet can't help but see a poetic twist in these resurfaced memories. Karma, they say, has finally arrived, and it has arrived in the form of Justin Baldoni, whose quiet but aggressive legal maneuvers against Blake and Ryan seem almost destined to flip their carefully polished image upside down. At first glance, Baldoni's strategy looked simple. Hire big names, stir noise, and overwhelm his opponents. But buried in the paperwork and filings is something far more subtle and potentially devastating. The addition of William Taylor, a man whose name doesn't scream tabloid fodder, but whose resume tells a story only insiders can truly appreciate, because Taylor once clerked for Judge Lyman, the very judge presiding over this contentious case, and if you understand the legal world, you know a clerkship is not just about prestige, it's about proximity to power, about learning the secret rhythms of a courtroom, the tendencies of a judge, the pressure points, the persuasion triggers, the things that annoy and the things that convince, and when you carry that knowledge into a new case, it's almost like holding the judge's playbook in your hand, knowing which buttons to press before even entering the courtroom. Imagine the advantage that gives Baldoni's side. While most teams analyze past rulings, study documents, and guess, Taylor already knows how Judge Lyman thinks, what arguments irritate him, what kind of tone works, when to push and when to pull back, and this insight can be applied to every motion, every hearing, every tiny interaction, quietly tilting the chessboard while the opposing team doesn't even realize they're already 2 steps behind. And so, while the addition of a high-profile appellate lawyer like Alexander Shapiro grabbed headlines and sparked speculation, it is the low-key presence of Taylor that might prove the deadliest piece on Baldoni's side, because influence isn't always about shouting the loudest, sometimes it's about whispering the right thing at the right time, and Reynolds and Lively's lawyers may not even realize the ground beneath their feet is being shifted until it's too late. The trap is becoming clearer, because Baldoni's team isn't just preparing for today's hearings, they are preparing for every possible turn, building a layered strategy where each move anticipates the other side's counter. And the introduction of Taylor Swift into the mix only adds to the sense of chaos and inevitability, because suddenly, one of the most powerful and private figures in pop culture finds herself dragged into the storm. Her name appears in filings in what becomes something far more serious. Note, a deposition request, and not just any deposition but one with stakes that could ripple across the case and beyond. Swift's attorney claims they were given little notice, only informed at the last minute, and when asked for availability, they offered a narrow window in late October, around the 20th, insisting that this was the only feasible time. On paper, it might sound like a minor scheduling conflict, but in litigation, timing is never neutral. It's leverage, it's power, it's the ability to delay, to pressure, to control the flow of discovery and testimony, and Swift's hesitation immediately sparks speculation. What exactly does she know that makes her deposition so critical? Her close friendship with Blake Lively is no secret, and in an age where text messages, private DMs, and casual phone calls can become courtroom exhibits, even the most innocent advice or remarks exchanged between friends can morph into powerful evidence if framed correctly. And if Baldoni's team believes Swift's words can be turned into ammunition, then suddenly one of Hollywood's most untouchable figures becomes a liability for Reynolds and Lively, an unpredictable variable in an already volatile case. Worse still, Swift's legal team's resistance,
to any of my
claiming they were
characters.
blindsided, that proper notice wasn't given, could itself be a strategy to shield her from uncomfortable disclosures, because if they argue procedure wasn't followed, they can delay or weaken the request, buying time to either prepare her carefully or perhaps avoid testimony altogether. And behind the polite scheduling notes, people see a battle over what truths may or may not be revealed. Fans online are already dissecting what kind of conversations Swift and Lively might have had. Did Blake confide frustrations about Baldoni? Did she share strategy? Did she vent about Ryan's anxieties? Did she say things that in a courtroom would sound damning instead of casual? Every possibility is fuel for speculation. And even without speaking a word, Swift's very presence in the filings casts a shadow over Blake and Ryan, suggesting secrets that may be too dangerous to expose. And then comes another twist, because while the headlines buzz about Swift, the American Civil Liberties Union, yes, the ACLU, steps into the storm, broadening the conflict from celebrity drama to a cultural and legal battlefield, suggesting that the implications of this case could extend far beyond personal reputations, into issues of speech, rights, and public accountability. And suddenly what looked like a spat between actors feels like the testing ground for something much larger. For Reynolds, this is disastrous timing. Professionally, he has been on a high, securing major projects, celebrated for the success of his latest Disney-backed film, carefully building a brand that balances humor, relatability, and family man appeal. But now, every time he posts on Instagram, he is forced to turn off comments flooded by speculation, mockery, and questions about his integrity, unable to maintain the playful public image that has long been his greatest asset. Insiders whisper that behind the polished smiles, the stress is unbearable, that sources close to the couple fear a divorce may be inevitable within a few years, not necessarily because of love lost, but because the pressure of scandal, legal battles, and reputational damage becomes too much to sustain. And the cracks are already visible in the way Reynolds lashes out, with 1,000 motions demanding sanctions against Baldoni to keep them bleeding in public. And as this storm gathers momentum, questions hang heavy in the air. Can Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively, Hollywood's golden couple, escape this trap? Or are they already too deep, already ensnared in a battle they cannot win? Their image, their marriage, their empire slowly unraveling under the weight of Baldoni's relentless campaign? Every twist suggests the latter, that what began as a scuffle has become an ambush, and that the next bombshell may be the one that breaks them for good. Because if karma has finally come for Ryan Reynolds, it has arrived dressed not as scandalous rumor, but as a meticulously planned legal war, orchestrated by a man who everyone underestimated until it was far too late. Subscribe my channel Coravanta for more updates daily. We says to sorry because we did not upload yesterday. Thanks or watching. Subscribe my channel. Thanks. Subscribe my channel Coravanta for more updates daily. We says to sorry because we did not upload yesterday. Thanks or watching. Subscribe my channel. Thanks.